Fine, let's start. Number 1. The Tassili Najer round head figures. High on a sandstone wall in the southeastern Sahara of Algeria, a figure stares out at you with no face at all. Its head is a smooth, swollen circle. It has no mouth, no eyes, no nose. It towers nearly 6 meters tall, and the man who copied it in the 1950s gave it a name that stuck for generations. He called it the Great Martian God. This is the Tassili Najer Plateau, a stretch of rock covering roughly 72,000 square kilometers, and it holds more than 15,000 engravings and paintings spread across about 12,000 years of human imagination. The faceless beings belong to its oldest painted phase, the round head period, made somewhere between 9,500 and 7,000 years ago. The French explorer Henri Lot led expeditions here in 1956 and 1957, and his book brought these images to a stunned world. When his copies reached the public, people noticed the resemblance to figures in helmets and suits. In 1968, Erich von Däniken seized on them in Chariots of the Gods, claiming they showed ancient astronauts visiting Earth. But there is a far more grounded explanation, and it is no less strange. To picture it, you have to erase the desert entirely. During the Roundhead period, the Sahara was green. Lakes and rivers cut across the land. Hippos wallowed, crocodiles basked, and herds of game moved through open savanna. The people who painted here lived in a vanished paradise. Most archaeologists read the round heads as masked dancers, shamans, or spirits, their swollen helmets representing ceremonial headgear or the moment of transformation into something more than human. Some figures float, run, or stand surrounded by smaller beings, suggesting trance and myth rather than portraits. One researcher, Giorgio Sammarini, noticed in 1992 that certain figures seem to hold mushrooms, and even have mushrooms sprouting from their bodies, hinting at prehistoric hallucinogen use. The paint itself was made from iron oxide ochres, white kaolin, and dark manganese. And here is the catch that keeps the mystery alive. Mineral pigment holds almost no organic material, so these paintings are nearly impossible to date directly. Who these faceless beings were, and what they worshipped, may never be fully known, which raises a question that follows us to the other side of the planet. Number 2. The Gwion Bradshaw paintings. In the Kimberley region of northwestern Australia, the rock walls hold figures so elegant they look out of place in deep prehistory. Slim human bodies stand in graceful poses, dressed in tasseled headdresses, sashes, arm ornaments, and dangling pendants painted with delicate, confident lines. Europeans named them Bradshaws, after the pastoralist Joseph Bradshaw, who reported them in 1891. The traditional owners call them Gwion. What makes them defy explanation is a tangle of age, makers, and the paint itself. In 1997, scientists dated a mud wasp nest sitting on top of one figure using thermoluminescence and got a minimum age of around 17,000 years. Later work led by Damien Finch in 2020 placed many Gwion-style paintings at roughly 12,000 years old. The figures are so refined, so full of fine fingers and ceremonial detail, that one researcher, Graham Walsh, controversially suggested they were not made by the ancestors of living Aboriginal people. That claim has been firmly rejected, and traditional owners find it offensive. The modern consensus is clear. These are the work of Aboriginal ancestors. Aboriginal tradition tells it differently again, saying the Gwion bird made the images using blood from its own beak. Then, there is the strangest detail of all. Much of the original paint is gone, yet the images stay vivid. Living colonies of black fungi and red bacteria have colonized the painted lines and replaced the pigment with themselves. The biologist Jack Pettigrew proposed that these images are kept alive by a self-sustaining microbial film, repainting themselves across the millennia. That same living pigment makes radiocarbon dating of the paint almost impossible, because the original material has been eaten away. The Kimberley holds tens of thousands of rock art sites, many in remote and sacred country, and groups like the Balangara now lead their documentation under cultural protocols. The transition from these slim Gwion figures to the later bolder Wandjina style is still poorly understood. So we are left with contested ages, a lost artistic origin, and a level of skill that feels impossibly early. The hand that drew these dancers is gone, and so is the world it moved through. But not every mysterious figure is human. Some, deliberately, are not. Number 3. The Sorcerer of Les Trois-Frères. Deep inside a cave in Ariège, in southwestern France, a single figure watches everything. It has the antlers of a stag, the round staring eyes of an owl, a long beard, the paws of a bear or a lion, the tail of a horse, and the half-crouching body of a man. It hangs about 4 meters above the floor, roughly 75 centimeters tall, positioned where it can survey an entire chamber covered with nearly 300 engraved animals. This is the Sorcerer of Les Trois-Frères, found in 1914 by the 3 sons of Count Henri Beguin, which is how the cave got its name, the 3 brothers. The image most people know comes from a tracing by the pioneering priest and prehistorian Abbé Henri Breuil. Breuil saw the figure as a shaman, a master of animals, a being tied to hunting magic. But there is an ongoing argument about how faithful his tracing really is. The figure is almost impossible to photograph in the dark, uneven rock, and some scholars suspect Breuil sharpened the antlers and the face, improving the creature to match his own theory. The cave dates broadly to the Magdalenian period, roughly 13,000 to 15,000 years ago. What the sorcerer is, though, no one can prove. It belongs to a class of images called therianthropes, beings that are part human and part animal. Nearby in the same cave system, there is another, a bison man that appears to be playing a musical bow. To reach the chamber, called the sanctuary, you have to crawl through a low passage, a deliberate restriction that hints at ritual. The engravings overlap in a dense palimpsest, layered across many separate visits. The researchers Jean Klotz and David Lewis Williams argued that figures like this reflect shamanic trance and altered states of consciousness. Skeptics reply that draping modern shamanism over Ice Age Europe is guesswork. The cave is closed to the public to protect it, and only a handful of researchers have ever studied it directly. Whether the sorcerer is a god, a spirit, a shaman mid-transformation, or simply a hunter in disguise, remains genuinely unresolved. It is one of the most analyzed single images in all of prehistory, and it still refuses to explain itself. From a hidden French chamber, we travel to a cave painted not with ochre, but with something far stranger. Number 4. The Magura cave paintings. In the far northwest of Bulgaria, near the village of Rabisha, a limestone cave winds underground for more than 2 kilometers. Its walls are covered with hundreds of dark figures, dancing women with triangular skirts and raised arms, hunters with bows, masked dancers, animals, suns, stars, and abstract signs. What sets Magura Cave apart from almost every painted cave on Earth is the medium. These images were not made with mineral ochre. They were painted in bat guano, the droppings of the bats that have lived in the cave for millennia. The art spans an enormous range of time, from the Epipaleolithic through the Neolithic and into the Bronze Age, somewhere between roughly 8,000 and 4,000 years old. One sequence of symbols has drawn special attention. Some researchers read it as a prehistoric solar calendar, possibly the oldest in Europe, marking a year of around 366 days, with festivals laid out along the wall. That interpretation is debated and not universally accepted, but the sun and star symbols are real, and they anchor the idea that these people were tracking time. Bulgarian researchers, including Magdalena Stamanova, have cataloged the paintings since the middle of the 20th century. The cave also held pottery and tools, showing long human occupation, and it sits beside Rabisha Lake, the largest karst lake in Bulgaria, which would have drawn settlers. The guano medium makes radiocarbon dating difficult, and because the panels were made across thousands of years, different images are wildly different in age. The cave stays at a stable 11 to 12 degrees Celsius all year, which has helped preserve the fragile painted figures, though they are sensitive to humidity and even human breath, so access is controlled. Many of the abstract signs have never been deciphered. The dancing women suggest fertility and ritual. The hunting scenes tie the art to survival, and the alleged calendar, if it is real, would mean people here were mapping the rhythm of the seasons onto stone. Magura combines art, possible astronomy, and a genuinely bizarre medium into one of the least explained painted caves in all of Europe. From a cave of droppings and possible calendars, we cross the Atlantic to a site that may break the timeline of human history itself. Number 5. Serra de Capivara and Pedra Furada. In the dry backlands of Piauí, in northeastern Brazil, lies Serra de Capivara National Park, a place with more than 1,000 documented rock art sites and tens of thousands of individual paintings. The art is full of life. Tiny brick-red figures leap, dance in circles, hunt long-necked deer, and gather in scenes that seem to show childbirth, ceremony, and daily existence. But the reason this place defies explanation is buried in the ground beneath the art. The most famous rock shelter, Pedra Furada, was excavated by the French-Brazilian archaeologist Gwion, beginning in the 1970s. Gwion reported charcoal from what she identified as ancient hearths, with radiocarbon dates reaching back as far as 48,000 to 60,000 years. If she is right, humans were living and burning fires here tens of thousands of years before they were supposed to have reached the Americas at all. The standard model, called Clovis First, held that people entered the New World only around 13,000 years ago. Gwyon's dates shatter that. Critics, including the archaeologists Tom Dillahay, David Meltzer, and James Adavasio, pushed back hard. They argued that the so-called hearths could be the residue of natural bushfires, and that the supposed stone tools could be geofacts, ordinary rocks chipped by falling from the cliff above. Telling a human campfire apart from a natural wildfire, deep in the past, is genuinely difficult. Gwion went further still, suggesting people may have arrived in South America by sea, possibly from Africa, a minority view that remains highly controversial. The foundation she created, known as FUMDUM, still manages research and conservation in the park. The pigment is iron oxide red, and the figures are small, dynamic, and grouped into stories. While her most extreme dates have never been fully accepted, the ground has shifted under the old orthodoxy. Sites like White Sands in New Mexico and Monte Verde in Chile have pushed accepted human arrival dates earlier, making Gwyon's claims feel less impossible than they once did. Whether people truly painted and lived at Pedra Furada tens of thousands of years ago is still one of the most contested questions in archaeology. Either way, the art's storytelling energy is undeniable. From the Americas, we go to a desert cave in Africa that quietly rewrote where art itself began. Number 6. The Apollo 11 Cave Stones. In the Huns Mountains of southwestern Namibia, near the Orange River, there is a rock shelter with one of the most unexpected names in archaeology. It is called the Apollo 11 Cave. The German archaeologist Wolfgang Erich Wendt was excavating there in July of 1969, at the exact moment the Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon, and he named his site after it. What he found there links one of humanity's oldest artworks to one of its most futuristic achievements. Wendt recovered 7 small painted stone slabs, beginning in 1969. These are not wall paintings. They are portable art, images painted on pieces of brown-gray quartzite, small enough to be carried in a hand. Charcoal in the same archaeological layers was radiocarbon dated to roughly 25,500 to 27,500 years ago, making these among the oldest figurative artworks in all of Africa. The most famous slab shows a therianthrope, a creature with the body of a feline, but what appear to be human hind legs. The slabs were found broken, and in some cases fragments of the same image turned up in different layers, which helped confirm just how old they really were. This discovery mattered far beyond Namibia. For a long time, the story of art was told as if it began in the painted caves of Ice Age Europe. The Apollo 11 stones placed African figurative art in the very same time range, undercutting that Eurocentric assumption. The site's occupation stretches from the Middle Stone Age into the Later Stone Age, a record of human presence going back deep into prehistory. The slabs are now held by the National Museum of Namibia in Windhoek. The human-feline figure connects to a long Southern African tradition of human-animal imagery, one that echoes much later in sandrock art across the region. Exactly what species it shows and what it meant, whether totem, spirit, or myth, is unknown. The images are only a few centimeters across, requiring close, careful study. The association with dated charcoal makes their age unusually secure, unlike so many wall paintings that cannot be dated at all. The Apollo 11 stones reframe the origins of art as a shared human capacity rather than a single regional invention. And if art could appear here, it could appear anywhere, including a cave no one found until very recently. Number 7. Coliboaia Cave. In the Apuseni Mountains of western Romania, in September of 2009, a group of Romanian cavers pushed through narrow, water-filled passages and found something no one expected to exist there. On the walls were charcoal drawings of a bison, a horse, one or more rhinoceroses, feline or cat-headed figures, and possibly a bear. When an international team dated the charcoal, the results were stunning. The art was roughly 32,000 to 35,000 years old, placing it among the oldest known cave art in all of Central and Eastern Europe. The team included the renowned French specialist Jean Clotz, along with Bernard Gély and the Romanian researchers Tudor Temaș and Călin Gimiș. That age overlaps the Aurignacian and Gravettian periods, putting Coliboaia in the same deep time bracket as the earliest art at Chauvet in France. This is why it defies the old story. For decades, the assumption was that the earliest sophisticated cave art was concentrated in southwestern Europe, in France and Spain, the Franco-Cantabrian heartland. Coliboaia showed that Ice Age artistic traditions stretched far to the east, into Romania, tens of thousands of years ago. The drawings are executed in confident black charcoal outlines. The woolly rhinoceros is especially significant because it is one of the signature animals of the very oldest European art, the same beast that appears at Chauvet. But the cave has not been kind to its own treasures. It was partly flooded and reshaped over the millennia, and some of the art may have been washed away. Cave bear bones and claw marks scar the walls, evidence that animals used the cave too, complicating the picture. The cat-headed feline figures recall the composite, therianthropic imagery found in caves on other continents. After the find was announced in 2010, it was compared directly to Chauvet and recognized as extending the map of early Aurignacian art. The cave is now protected, with access strictly limited to researchers. Its remote, hard-to-reach location is exactly what preserved the fragile charcoal for so long. Coliboaia is still little known to the public, yet it carries a profound lesson. Major prehistoric art can be hiding in caves no one has explored, waiting in the dark to overturn what we thought we knew. And sometimes what waits in the dark is not animals at all, but the marks of human hands. Number 8. Cueva De Las Manos. In the canyon of the Pinturas River, in the Santa Cruz province of Patagonia, Argentina, there is a rock wall covered in hundreds of human hands. They were made by pressing a hand flat against the stone and blowing pigment around it, leaving a stencil, a negative outline of a real person's hand. The site is called Cueva De Las Manos, the Cave of the Hands, and it has been a World Heritage Site since 1999. The art was made over an immense span, with associated dates running from roughly 9,500 to 13,000 years ago, and activity continuing later. These are among the oldest artworks in all of South America. The most haunting detail is statistical. The overwhelming majority of the stenciled hands are left hands. That tells us how they were made. The painter held the spray pipe in the right hand and pressed the left against the wall. The pigment was blown through hollow bird bone tubes, examples of which have been found at the site. The colors came from minerals: iron oxides for red, manganese and charcoal for black, kaolin for white, and a mineral called nitrogerosite for yellow. Analysis of the hand sizes suggests that many were made by adolescents and young people, hinting that the stenciling may have been part of initiation rituals, a rite of passage marked on stone. Beyond the hands, the walls hold vivid hunting scenes: herds of guanaco, the wild camelids of Patagonia, along with rheas, felines, and dynamic human figures. The hunters are shown working together, using bolus and ambush tactics to bring down the guanaco. These images were made by the ancestors of later Patagonian peoples, including the Tehuelche. The art accumulated across many cultural phases, overlapping into a dense palimpsest, and sheltering overhangs protected it from rain and sun. A few stencils show hands with missing or bent fingers, which could mean ritual gestures, injury, or even ritual amputation. The Argentine archaeologist Carlos Gradin studied the site extensively from the 1960s onward, but the central question remains open. Why did people return to this one canyon for thousands of years to leave their hands on the rock? Almost always the left, again and again. It is one of the purest expressions of a universal human impulse: the need to say, "I was here." From a wall of human hands, we go to the island that holds the oldest known art on Earth. Number 9. The Sulawesi Cave Paintings. On the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, in the limestone karst caves of the Maros Pangkep region, scientists have found art that shattered the entire timeline of human creativity. In a cave called Liang Tedonge, there is a painting of a Sulawesi warty pig, nearly life-size, shown in profile with the crest of hair and facial warts of its species. In 2021, a team led by Maxime Aubert and Adam Brum of Griffith University dated it to at least 45,500 years old, making it, at the time, the oldest known figurative animal painting in the world. They dated it using uranium series analysis of the calcite popcorn that had grown over the paint, because that calcite must be younger than the painting underneath, giving a minimum age. Then it got older still. In 2019, the same researchers announced a hunting scene in another cave, Ling Bulu Sipong 4, dated to around 43,900 years. It shows small part human, part animal figures, therianthropes, apparently hunting wild pigs and dwarf buffalo with spears or ropes. That panel is considered the oldest known narrative scene in all of art, the oldest story humans ever painted. These therianthropes are among the earliest evidence anywhere of people imagining beings that do not exist in nature, the seed of myth and spirituality. And in 2024, refined laser ablation dating pushed a scene in Liang Karampuang, showing a pig and 3 human-like figures, back to around 51,200 years. The new record for the oldest narrative art. Earlier, in 2014, hand stencils in the region had already been dated to nearly 40,000 years. The pigments are red and mulberry purple ochres on limestone. All of this overturned the long-held assumption that sophisticated figurative art began in Europe. It reframes Wallacea, the islands between Asia and Australia, as a true crucible of the symbolic human mind. But the art is in danger. The rock surfaces are exfoliating, flaking away, possibly accelerated by climate change and shifting humidity, and conservation is now urgent. Hundreds of art caves dot the region, and surveys keep finding more. The implication is staggering. The capacity for storytelling and religious imagination was alive in humans tens of thousands of years before the famous caves of France. The world's oldest known stories were painted not in Europe, but on a remote Indonesian island. And that brings us finally to the masterpiece that the world refused to believe was real. Number 10. The Altamira Ceiling Bison. In a cave near Santillana del Mar, in Cantabria, in northern Spain, there is a ceiling so magnificent it has been called the Sistine Chapel of Paleolithic art. Across the great ceiling of Altamira march vivid bison, painted in red, ochre, black, and brown, curled and leaping and resting, their bodies shaped to follow the natural bulges of the rock so that they seem to swell into 3 dimensions. Alongside them are horses, deer, a possible wild boar, hand stencils, and abstract signs, more than 20 large animals in all. The cave was first noted in 1868, but the ceiling paintings were truly recognized in 1879 by Marcelino Sanz de Sautuola, guided by his young daughter Maria, who looked up and saw the bison overhead. When Sautuola published his discovery in 1880, the scientific establishment did something shameful. They called it a forgery. They simply could not believe that Ice Age humans were capable of art this sophisticated. The French prehistorian Émile Cartaillac led the accusations of fraud, and Sautuola died in 1888 still discredited, his honesty in ruins. Then the truth caught up. As similar paintings were confirmed in French caves, the evidence became undeniable. In 1902, Cartaillac publicly recanted in a famous article titled Mea Culpa of a Skeptic, vindicating Sautuola, who had been right all along, though he did not live to see it. The polychrome bison date to roughly 14,000 to 18,500 years ago, in the Magdalenian period, though uranium-thorium dating by Alistair Pike and colleagues has shown that some images in the cave are far older, up to 36,000 years, and that the cave was decorated over a span of more than 20,000 years. The pigments came from ochre for the reds and yellows, and charcoal and manganese for the blacks, applied with pads, fingers, and blowing techniques. The original cave was closed to the public in 2002 because the breath and warmth of visitors were fueling microbial growth and deterioration. A precise replica, the Neo Cave, was built at the adjacent museum so people can experience the art without destroying it. Altamira is both a triumph and a warning, a reminder that the truly extraordinary can be denied for decades simply because it defies expectation. Look back across these 10 sites, and a single, impossible figure keeps reappearing. It is part human and part animal, and scientists call it a therianthrope. The Sorcerer of France has antlers and paws. The Apollo 11 slab of Namibia shows a feline with human legs. The hunting spirits of Sulawesi blend people and beasts. The cat-headed figures of Coliboaia hint at the same idea, and the masked beings of Tassili may belong to the family too. What makes this so striking is that these images appear in cultures with no possible contact, separated by entire oceans and by tens of thousands of years. This is not one idea spreading from one place. It looks like a shared impulse, welling up independently again and again. The famous Lion Man ivory figurine from Germany, carved roughly 40,000 years ago, shows the same motif in sculpture. The researcher David Lewis Williams argued that these hybrids reflect trance and altered states of consciousness, and John Klotz saw Paleolithic art as fundamentally about spirits and the supernatural. Critics warn against forcing modern shamanism onto deep prehistory, and they have a point. There are gentler readings too: hunters in animal disguise, totemic ancestors, mythic beings, or simply characters in a story. But whatever the explanation, the capacity to picture something that does not exist is one of the defining marks of the modern human mind. The Sulawesi therianthropes push that capacity back beyond 50,000 years, far earlier than anyone once imagined. Masks and costumes, like those at Tassili, may have been the physical bridge between the human world and the animal one, a way to literally become the other. These beings cluster in the hardest to reach, most ritually charged spaces in each cave, and the animals chosen are often the powerful and the dangerous. Across the entire inhabited world, our ancestors kept drawing the same being that was more than human. It is among the oldest evidence of religion or mythology in our species, and no single explanation fits every case. The pattern is undeniably real. The meaning behind it remains one of prehistory's deepest open questions. And part of why it stays open is that even dating these images is a battle in itself. Putting a firm date on cave art is one of the hardest problems in archaeology, and understanding why explains so many of these mysteries. The trouble starts with the paint. Mineral pigments like ochre and manganese contain little or no organic carbon, which means radiocarbon dating, the workhorse of archaeology, often simply fails on them. Charcoal drawings can be radiocarbon dated because charcoal is organic, but sampling the art means destroying a tiny piece of it, and contamination, old wood, and reused pigment can all skew the results. The breakthrough for the very oldest art came from a different approach, uranium series dating. Instead of dating the paint, scientists date the thin calcite crusts that slowly grow over it. Since that calcite formed on top of the painting must be older, giving a reliable minimum age. This is the method that produced the astonishing Sulawesi dates and pushed Spanish cave art past 36,000 years. In the Kimberley, researchers even dated a fossilized mud wasp nest sitting on top of a Gwion figure, using thermoluminescence. Other times, all archaeologists have is superposition, one image painted over another, which gives relative order, but not absolute age. Style sequences help arrange phases, but they assume art evolved in a tidy line, which may not be true. The Pedra-Furada dispute in Brazil shows the deeper problem. There, the argument is whether ancient hearths and tools are even human at all, or natural features called geofacts, the residue of wildfires and falling rock. Distinguishing a human campfire from a natural blaze across tens of thousands of years is genuinely hard. Add small sample sizes, inaccessible panels, and the fact that different labs sometimes produce conflicting dates for the same site, and you have a field full of fierce debate. The living biofilms of the Kimberley make it worse by devouring the original pigment, erasing the very material a scientist would need to test. Yet a clear trend has emerged. Almost every new method and every new discovery pushes the origin of art earlier, not later, and reveals it to be more widespread than anyone expected. The deeper science looks, the older our creativity turns out to be. And that creativity was expressed through real physical mastery, in conditions that were often terrifying. Consider what it actually took to make these images, because the technical achievement rivals the conceptual one. The colors came from the earth. Reds and yellows were ground from iron oxide ochres. Black came from charcoal and from manganese dioxide. Whites came from kaolin clay, gypsum, or huntite. These minerals were crushed into powder and mixed with binders, water, saliva, animal fat, blood, or plant juices to make them stick. The artists applied the paint in many ways, with their fingers, with pads of moss or fur, with chewed sticks frayed into brushes. For the hand stencils at Cueva De Las Manos and on Sulawesi, they blew pigment through hollow bird bone tubes, spraying it around a hand pressed to the wall. The fact that this same blow spray technique appears on opposite sides of the planet tells you how ancient and how universal it is. At Altamira, the painters used the natural contours of the rock itself, letting bulges in the stone give their bison real volume and life. But the most haunting part is where they chose to work. So much of this art lies deep inside caves, in total darkness, far from where people actually lived. To see it all, they used tallow lamps, torches, and hearths, and stone lamps still survive at some sites. To reach the best panels, at Les Trois-Frères and at Coliboaia, they had to crawl through tight, dangerous passages, sometimes flooded with water. That deliberate choice of inaccessible, frightening spaces strongly suggests ritual rather than decoration. For high ceilings and elevated figures, they needed scaffolding or had to climb. Some pigment recipes were heated or carefully mixed, showing real chemical knowledge. The portable Apollo 11 slabs proved the same skills could be applied to objects carried in the hand. An engraving with flint tools complemented the painting, as with the sorcerer. Remarkably, the color palettes stayed consistent across continents because everyone drew on the same available minerals. Researchers studying cave acoustics have even found that some painted chambers seem chosen for their resonance and echo. The physical effort, the danger, the planning, the skill, all of it underlines a single truth. This art was not idle. It mattered enormously to the people who risked the dark to make it. Which leaves us with the hardest question of all. What did it mean? We can date these images, describe them, and map them, but we rarely know what they actually meant to the people who made them, and that gap is the real mystery. Was this hunting magic, religion, storytelling, record-keeping, or something for which we have no word at all? The shamanism model is influential, but it cannot be proven, and it may say more about modern assumptions than about the Ice Age mind. Why are the most important images so often placed in dark, dangerous, hard-to-reach spaces, rather than where people lived? Why do certain animals dominate the walls, while the creatures people actually ate every day are sometimes missing entirely? Why are human figures so frequently schematic, masked, or hybrid, and so rarely realistic portraits? Why are hands almost always the left, stenciled in their hundreds across the whole world? And what about the abstract signs, the dots, grids, and lines? The researcher Genevieve von Petzinger cataloged recurring geometric signs across European caves and found the same handful repeating site after site, raising the possibility of a shared symbolic code, perhaps even a step toward writing. The alleged calendar at Magura raises the chance that some art tracked time and the heavens. The fact that people returned to single sites for thousands of years tells us these places held enduring meaning. The fact that the same motifs surface worldwide hints at something universal in human cognition. But we cannot ask the artists, and no oral tradition reaches back across these spans with certainty. Every interpretation we offer reveals as much about us as about them, and each new round of dating keeps overturning stories we thought were settled, which is a lesson in humility. The art may have served many purposes at once, defying any single tidy explanation. Some meaning is almost certainly lost forever, sealed away with the cultures that made it, and what survives is only a fraction. Most prehistoric art, painted on exposed rock or perishable surfaces, has surely vanished without a trace. The walls tell us clearly that something mattered to these people. They simply will not tell us what. And yet, taken together, they reveal something profound about who we are. Stand back and look at all 10 of these places at once, and a single picture emerges. They span every inhabited continent and tens of thousands of years, from the Sahara to Patagonia, from a French chamber to an Indonesian island. Together, they prove that art is not a European invention. It is a human birthright. The oldest known figurative art, on Sulawesi at around 51,000 years, sits far from the traditional cradle of civilization. Wherever modern humans traveled, across Africa, Europe, Asia, the Americas, and Australia, they painted. The drive to make marks, images, and stories appears to be wired into our very species. The therianthropes show that our ancestors already imagined gods, spirits, and myths. The stenciled hands show the timeless human need to leave a personal trace and declare across all of time that we existed. The sheer sophistication of Altamira and of the Gwion figures proves that the full modern human mind was present deep in the Ice Age, no less capable than our own. Disputes like Pedra Furada remind us that the human story keeps getting older with every excavation. Lost makers, lost meanings, and contested dates keep these works genuinely mysterious. And that mystery is not a flaw. It is the whole point. These images ask questions we may never fully answer. They were the moment our ancestors first began to take the imagination inside their heads and pour it out onto the world, turning every blank cave wall into a screen for the mind. Conservation crises, the exfoliating rock of Sulawesi, the sealed cave of Altamira, mean some of these treasures may not survive us, and replicas and digital scans now race to record what erosion is erasing. But for now, these paintings connect us directly to minds like our own across an almost unimaginable gulf of time. They collapse the distance between primitive and modern, because the truth is simpler and stranger than that. They were us. These are the first chapters of the human story, written in ochre and charcoal, and when we stand before them, we are meeting the oldest version of ourselves, still staring back out of the dark.